The king who would really make his mark on Fontainebleau was Henri IV, who became King of France in 1589.
Henry IV is known to this day as Le Bon Roi Henri, the good King Henry. So it's fair to say he was liked during his time and has come down to us as perhaps the most likable of all French monarchs.
The ruler who inherits a kingdom ravaged by religious wars for nearly 40 years will succeed in breaking the deadlock. He recants his faith, converts to Catholicism, and signs the Edict of Nantes, which grants new rights to Protestants.
What Nantes did and proclaimed was a pacification, a final pacification of the religious wars plaguing France for the previous generation.
He's famously known for having said, Paris vaut bien une messe, Paris is well worth a mass. This is what one must do in order to keep our country from tearing itself apart.
Peace found, Henri IV turns to the Château of Fontainebleau. It is his favorite residence. He will stay there for 1,200 days.
What we don't know is that he is a king builder. He wanted to give its luster back to the monarchy. And he used Fontainebleau a lot to do this, where he did a lot of work. Henri IV profoundly transformed the castle.
And even then, it couldn't accommodate all the court. Lots of people stayed outside and came in to visit.
In less than 10 years, Henri IV transformed the face of the royal residence, multiplying by 4 the surface area of the castle. He ordered the construction of spacious buildings and an even larger gallery than that of his grandfather, Francis I. To improve the daily life of the court and its dining, the ruler decided on 3 new buildings that would form a new enclosure. It is La Cour des Offices, which now equips its residents with large kitchens, pantry, and cupboards.
All the kings ate well, but this was on another scale entirely. It was really a political maneuver as much as an architectural one. And when we see it today, you can't imagine that such a large assemblage of buildings was given over merely to food.
Henri IV had an obsession: to transform the oval courtyard to allow better movement in his castle. He leveled the eastern part of the courtyard and enlarged it. But how to preserve all its harmony? How to give the oval courtyard a straight-lined appearance? The clever solution? Create screen facades, which also make it possible to preserve a chapel from the time of Francis I.
We are here in a corridor between the original chapel from the time of Francis I, the chapel of Saint-Saturnins facade, and this screen facade which was installed by Henri IV's architect to unify the oval courtyard.
Thanks to this monumental trompe-l'œil, the oval courtyard no longer has an oval, only the name. But for Henri IV, the biggest project remains at work, that of water control. And for the exteriors of Fontainebleau, the king is ready for anything.
The people at that time lived with very little water at their disposal. For the king to have gushing water in his domains, he's actually showing his wealth, his power, his ability to tame the elements.
Henri IV entrusted the construction of these structures to renowned Italian hydraulic engineers, the Francini brothers.
They had the experience, they had the know-how to rebuild hydraulic structures, as well as to power and create ornamental waterworks, since they were also innovators.
At the sovereign's request, the Francinis had to place fountains in all the courtyards of the castle, a challenge for the period, which will require the installation of a very complex underground network. In total, 3 aqueducts will supply the estate's water supply. Francis I's 1.5-kilometer long one has a flow rate of about 30 liters of water per second.
There are important underground constructions, not only superstructures, but also all the infrastructure that has been built over several centuries.
But the Francinis realized that the 2 aqueducts at their disposal, those of Henri II and Francis I, would not be enough to supply all the works. They need to build a 3rd one. It will be Henry IV's aqueduct. Underground and nearly 1 kilometer long, just like the other ones, it will transport water by gravity thanks to a slope of only 1%.
Which still requires precision from a topography implementation point of view, which was incredible at the time.
The water from the aqueduct flows through the regulation and filtration basin.
In the hydraulic system, we have on this side the Henry IV aqueduct with its central gutter that flows into this central basin. It acts as a filter. We see the deposits at the bottom of the basin. Then it has a change of direction that takes place to divert the water to the gardens.
But the Francini brothers' work does not stop there. They also need to tame the Changy rivulet, a small stream that crosses the king's property and floods his gardens. And for that they will have a clever idea: canalize the stream. The work is huge and problematic because the ground is sloping. It is necessary to redevelop the entire environment, dig on one side and backfilled on the other to create a flat surface over more than a kilometer.
We do not know exactly how this work was carried out, but it took lots of men and mechanical means to carry out the work. With animals. It took a lot of animals to transport the land, obviously, since it was being transferred from one point to another.
It must have been a small army that had to dig this canal because it involved a lot of earth-moving work.
It's a venture that nowadays seems quite incredible, knowing that at the time they didn't have the sophisticated means that we have today.
Henry IV himself is passionate about the building of the canal. His entourage reports that he can stay up to 5 to 6 hours observing the site.
He oversaw the work for days on end. He would sit watching the builders work.
In total, it will take the Francini workers 3 years to build the Grand Canal, which will become a place of entertainment and splendor for the court, and above all, the longest in France.
The Grand Canal that Henry IV had built was a novelty. There had been other similar plans d'eau water sites. It wasn't until very much later that a similar canal was built at Versailles.
The characteristics of the Grand Canal are quite impressive. It makes my head spin. With a length of 1,200 meters, a width of 37 meters, which makes a surface area of about 46,000 square meters, and a water resource capacity of 140,000 meters cubed.
Thanks to its fountains, its aqueduct, and its large canal, Henry IV thus succeeded in taming water like no king of France had done before. Mastering and expanding the environment were Henry IV's ambitious wishes. With more than 50,000 square meters of surface area, almost as much as the Palace of Versailles 100 years later, Fontainebleau was at that time the megastructure of the great century.